we have heard enough from me. I am now going to pass over to Jenny from Good Business Charter. Thank you very much, Jenny, for giving us your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Olivia, and it's great to be with you all this lunchtime. I wonder if you're eating a sandwich while you listen to me or whether you'll eat a bit later, but it's just great to have this opportunity to be with you. So I'm just going to take 20-25 minutes to talk through the Good Business Charter, what it is, why it exists, and then particularly pull out some examples, because that's, I think, what can be most helpful, some practical examples of different organisations that are accredited and how the Good Business Charter framework is helping them on their responsible business journey. So if you want to go on to the first slide. So how to achieve Good Business Charter accreditation, that's what we're going to be looking at, but as I said, much wider than that. So if we go on to the next slide, we're all about recognising, championing and encouraging responsible business behaviour. So we were set up by Julian Richer, the retail entrepreneur. Now he has spent decades building up a business that is passionate about caring for people. So that has been really his focus, and he has survived in a ferociously competitive sector because he treats people well, so particularly the workforce. He's known for things like holiday homes that staff can use free of charge during the year, and various other benefits. He really ensures that employees have a voice now. Richer Sounds is now employee owned, but even before there were things like suggestion schemes, and if your suggestion was taken on board, you got a financial reward for that, and just really ensuring that everyone felt included and part of the business, because that makes good business sense. It also means that they will treat their customers better, and as a retail business, that is particularly important, that customers are getting a great service. He is also really proud to pay his taxes and just gets really cross about those businesses that don't, and indeed has set up a separate charity called Tax Watch, which is about looking at how organisations are not paying their tax. So there was a lot of themes, and he really was passionate about responsible business behaviour. What he then did was bring together the TUC and the CBI back in 2019 to get the voice of businesses and the voice of workers to bring together a clear framework for responsible business behaviour. So if we go on to the next slide. So what the Good Business Charter seeks to do is set out a really clear benchmark. So obviously we've just referenced B Corp. The reality is that Richer Sounds were looking at doing B Corp certification, but it does take an awful lot of resources. And the reality is, and I know that they are changing to make minimum standards, but at the moment it's all about getting 80 points out of a possible 200, and you pick and choose. And some organisations go really deep into the environment and are doing amazing things there, but perhaps they're not paying the real living wage. And really, he felt, and we now feel, there's a very clear need for a clear benchmark for responsible business behaviour with minimum standards required. And that the reality is that makes it a high bar worth striving for. So I mentioned the real living wage. We had to throw out Capita earlier this year because they're no longer committing to paying the real living wage, and that's just not good enough. They have to be able to commit to all 10. So our 10 components cover care for employees, suppliers, customers, as well as paying your fair tax, and of course the planet. So these are our 10, and you'll see as you look at these that we are very strong on the S in ESG, so the socially responsible side. And to be perfectly honest, I have been to events that say it's about sustainability in its widest sense, and then I sit through panel after panel after panel, focus only on the environment. And of course that matters, and that's why it's one of our 10. But there has been a huge risk that we go deep in the planet and worrying about future generations, whilst forgetting about our current generations and the importance of providing secure work, work where people feel included, work where they have a voice, where they are cared for. And there's also been a really interesting aspect around having prompt payment to suppliers as one of our 10. And in 2021, we launched a streamlined version of the Good Business Charter specifically for small businesses with less than 50 employees. And we did this in partnership with the FSB because they said this matters, this is really important. We think your language needs to be changed a bit and just simplified a bit for small businesses. And of course, prompt payment is really, really important to small businesses. And I'm really proud that we have that as one of our 10. We have organisations that haven't been able to accredit, big organisations, because they don't have the systems in place to pay their suppliers promptly. And that's just not good enough, in my opinion. So we've been working with the Small Business Commissioner and others to really champion this, that actually this is one of the 10. If we treat our suppliers well, you know what, it's just about treating people how you would want to be treated, isn't it? You know, isn't some of this just common sense? We want to be paid on time. We want to be cared for. We want to be treated with respect. And our 10 is really about that, whether that's your suppliers, your customers, paying your fair share of tax, because actually there's nothing more frustrating than businesses that are happily enjoying the fact that their staff have been educated by the system, get healthcare through the system, but they're not paying their fair share of tax in this country, and we just don't think that's okay. So we're there to hold people to account. But is it that important? Now, I know I'm talking to the converted here because many of you will already be on this journey of responsible business, but just some stats for you, if I may. So 97% of consumers in a 2021 poll said they think it's important for a business to act responsibly. So the TSB did some polling, and that's what they found, that actually people think it is important for businesses to act responsibly. The most recent Institute of Business Ethics survey found that 43% of respondents felt that corporate tax avoidance was the most important ethical issue for them. So if you're a B2C business, it really matters, these subjects. People get really cross that there is corporate tax avoidance. Second in their survey is bribery and corruption, and then the environment comes in third. And almost half of younger workers want the company they work for to demonstrate a commitment to ESG. Almost half, and that's only going to increase. And 20% have turned down a job offer when the company's ESG commitments were not in line with their values. And this is really a common theme that's coming back, because ultimately consumers care, but they are pressed financially. That's the reality. So they want to shop ethically, they want to favour responsible businesses, but there's also a massive challenge financially in the current climate, isn't there? But employees, they are looking for organisations that can really show what they stand for and show their value, and they have a bit more opportunity at the moment to pick and choose between employers. So that really matters as well. So accreditation demonstrates that you put people first. That's, as I've mentioned, that is one of Julian's mantras, that we put people first, and that is what accreditation demonstrates, and that you exist for much more than profit. That's what we're trying to show, that there is a wider thing. Now, we don't tend to talk about purpose. Some organisations look about kind of purpose as your guiding light. Our focus is simply on behaving responsibly, on responsible capitalism, on, yes, you've got to make a profit because that's, why your business can't survive without that. But let's make sure we're doing it in a responsible way, and let's champion that. So the Good Business Charter framework, we believe, helps you communicate your values in just a really clear way. It helps you attract top talent, and it helps you foster loyal customers. We've seen organisations do responsible business reports, which just shows around our 10 components how they do this. We're just talking to a building society actually, who are getting their annual report ready, and they have a whole section around the Good Business Charter and what they're doing for each of those components. It's just a really helpful framework, and it nudges business behaviour forward. Many businesses might do 7 or 8 of our 10, but they have to change behaviour, and that's what we want to see. We want to see everything lifted so that we're all behaving responsibly. So how do we actually go about accreditation? What does that look like? Well, we have tried to design something that is accessible. That is a really key value for us, that we are transparent and accessible, and it's something that Julian feels very passionate about as well. So this is a comprehensive commitment to responsible business that we have made cost effective. So we haven't made it expensive. We'll go on to prices in a minute, but It is being subsidised by Julian. Julian has a charity. Over the years, Richer Sounds has given 15% of their profits to charity, and it's now employee owned, but they still have a percentage of it. And with that percentage, they're able to give us a grant, and it enables us to keep it really accessible, especially to small businesses. We really want to make sure that cost isn't a factor. It's very easy to apply for. So the Good Business Charter is done as self-certification. The reason we do it like that is, A, quite frankly, we're not charging enough to be able to do full audits. We are a small team, we're a charity. But B, as an auditor by profession, and my first job was as a chartered accountant, I know that actually I could come in and audit your company and I still might not find the person who's on a 0 hours contract somewhere and is being treated badly. The reality is I don't think an audit can necessarily pick everything up. So the way we do it is self-certification. Of course, we do background checks around, there's a lot of different things you can go to now, like Glassdoor and all sorts of things, but Companies House and linking in with some of our partners like the Living Wage Foundation. But then the really key thing is that we say, right, you have to put our logo on your website, you have to promote it internally and externally. And therefore, if an employee or a supplier or customer thinks they're not a responsible business, that's rubbish, they can report it to us and then we will investigate. Then we will ask for evidence and we will look at whether you can retain your accreditation. So that's the way we do it. And in my experience, I have more frequent conversations with businesses that are like, we do this, but we're not sure it's enough. And I'm like, it is, you're good. But they are concerned. So there's a lot of due diligence that businesses do, which gives us confidence that those that are proudly displaying their accreditation are firmly committed to it and putting resources into that. So it's open to all. That has been really an important thing for us. It's open to charities, it's open to public sector, it's open to sole traders, it's open to organisations of all shapes, sizes and sectors. And if you're in a sector where you're like, no, this isn't going to work for us, I want to hear, because we want to make sure it does work for all sectors. We are aware of some systemic problems that make some of our components challenging in some sectors, but we still think that they are the right 10. And in the 4 years that we've been in operation, I haven't really had anyone say you're totally missing one. It feels like the 10 has captured the key areas. And we speak the public's language, because the reality is that there's a lot of different disclosures and certifications and different things out there. But to the person on the street, that they don't know what that means, and actually they don't even understand half the stuff that people have in their reports and on their websites and all the rest of it. So this is just a really clear way, like Fair Trade does with bananas, to say, you know, we're a responsible business and we are passionate about this. So I said that we would talk about the pricing. So we have 2 different routes for SMEs. So for 0 to 50 employees, it's 10 questions, 1 per each question. There's simple comment boxes to complete on what you're doing, and the cost is £150 sign-up fee, and the future years is just £50 per annum. So that's what you're looking at if you're 0 to 50. If you tip over in the 51 to 250 employees, there are more extensive questions, but it's still accessible, and we're here to help with the detail, particularly around some of the EDI questions, things like that. And the cost for them is a £300 sign-up fee, and future years £250. So you can see it's at the top level. So 0 to 50, £50, 51 to 250, £250. And we hope that that just is accessible. It shows a commitment by signing up, and you do have to renew each year. So next slide. Customers, employees and other stakeholders want to work with companies who share their values and that they can trust. And you can communicate them clearly and encourage those in your supply chain and your clients to accredit too. Encourage them to do it so that you can know that gives you confidence with your ethical sourcing as well. And we think it's an accessible and affordable way to let customers, employees and suppliers know that you're a great company to work with, and it sets you apart because you can meet all 10. Believe me when I say that many can't. And so if you accredit, you can lead the way on this. And we do have a lot of organisations, not a lot, we do have some organisations that are both B Corp and GBC accredited, because they show different things. So Brompton Bicycles is an example of one that did GBC first and then went on to do their B Corp certification. Others have done it in a direction because the GBC shows different things from what B Corp shows. So I want to just finish by looking at some examples for you. So first of all, a little focus on the real living wage. Now, it's interesting because we feel like the actual cost of accrediting isn't high, but if you don't currently pay the real living wage and you're going to up to it, then we accept that that is a cost, and we want to be really upfront about that. Just want to focus on seniors helping seniors. They provide care for the elderly who need help to live at home, and it's such a great model because the care is provided by senior people with care experience, and that's the kind of model. And the care sector is one of those sectors that is absolutely struggles with paying the real living wage, which is one rate outside, so it's £12, I think. I should have checked my figures, and £13.15, I think, in London. And it is above the national living wage, and also it is for all people 18 and above. So whereas there are tiers for the national living, so it can be a challenge. But the reality is that they have found that it has been to their benefit because they get the right carers. They are in a they are able to recruit those who really care just by paying that bit more money, because that's what people need to live on. The real living wage is calculated by looking at what it actually costs to live on in Britain. So Sally, the co-owner, says they believe they're the only care company who have no issues finding the right carers, and that is saying something, I would imagine, in this sector. And they found that other care companies who followed their lead on pay have showed improvement results. So I think it is a upfront cost, but it does reap dividends, and it will help with your retention, which reduces recruitment costs, and your staff will ultimately be happy because they're being paid enough to live on. And Julian Richard obviously is in retail. That's another sector that finds this a challenge, but he has been paying the real living wage for years and years, and ensures that people get what they need to live on. And so it is the real living wage is doing great guns. They've got 14,000 living wage employers, though you don't have to accredit with the Living Wage Foundation to be GBC accredited. You can just commit to it. So that's a focus on real living wage. Next is a focus on EDI. Totally different type of sector now. Bradbury Global Risk is a security, intelligence and risk management company. Now, EDI is a really interesting one because you can take it in so many different directions, and I think that's something that this is a journey. Whilst real living wages, you either pay it or you don't. Things like EDI is a journey, and these are the kind of things that Heart of the City, I know, helps you think and work through and look at. This is something that you may take different areas to focus on, whether it's, we've heard some brilliant stories, small organisations doing great things to cater for neurodiversity or to ensure that certain ethnic minorities are represented, loads of great stuff. So and what I like about Bradbury Global Risk, small company, and they've really focused on their recruitment practices. So they've designed them to attract diverse talent through methods such as blind recruitment, diverse interview panels, guaranteed interviews for qualified applicants with disabilities, and they're really working hard. And I love that they have a mentorship program to pair new hires with experienced mentors. How brilliant. They're really investing in their people, and they're seeing a great result of a real diverse workforce, which really reaps dividends. So that's focus on EDI. Next one is environmental responsibility. This organisation is a bit bigger. It's more in the M rather than the S, but still not massive. Feedwater is a manufacturer and supplier of water treatment chemicals, equipment and water softeners, and they have consultancy services as well. And they've really brought environmental responsibility to be part of their DNA, and that's it. I think when we embed this stuff and it's owned by the whole organisation, it doesn't just sit with one individual. It's really owned by the leadership, but really embedded through every area of the organisation, then you're onto a winner, really, and the organisation can clearly champion it in a holistic way. So they've made loads of improvements in their business, invested more in their electric vehicles. They've switched all their electricity contracts to 100% renewable. They're taking their first formal steps on the path to net zero, and they've just done lots involving all the staff in that. As they've said, lots of positive environmental actions. But as their technical manager says, I think it's important to highlight the contribution of individuals in this effort. So they really brought everyone on the journey, which I think is fantastic. The Good Business Charter is a good way to say, well, let's bring everyone on this journey. Let's be a movement for change. Let's really get responsible business not just recognised, but championed and encouraged. So they're doing great stuff. We've got a blog on our website about what they're doing. And finally, I just wanted to highlight A.V. Dawson about communicating your values. This isn't about one of our 10, but I suppose I wanted to end on this by saying that there's a real opportunity in an information overloaded world to just communicate your values in a clear way with the Good Business Charter. And we, in February, had our first Good Business Week, which we just took a week to celebrate good business. And next week we're doing it as a fortnight so that we can take a working day for each component and really go deep in that and celebrate the great work that's going on. So A.V. Dawson, which owns the port up in Middlesbrough, so their kind of logistics and transport company, they really use that week to focus on their colleagues' awareness of the week, of the Good Business Charter as a whole. So they put posters up, they had e-posters on screens, they kind of used every avenue available to them to spread awareness. And that inclusive approach ensured that every employee and visitor to the port was immersed in the spirit of responsible business conduct. Isn't that fab? I just think that's so great. And they're promoting the framework through their supply chain, to their tenants. They've already been referring people to us who are now looking at accreditation. And in York, we have a GBC place where the council, both universities, Aviva's a big employer here, this is where I live, are all accredited Network Rail and are championing it and encouraging small businesses to accredit. We're working with the FSB in the area, and we've now got a mayor for York and North Yorkshire. So we're hoping to just keep that momentum going so that together we see a nation really where workers are treated properly, have got decent work, where suppliers are being paid on time, which I'm sure you can all appreciate, and where we're caring for our planet properly and paying our tax. So, hopefully you feel that these are the right things to be focusing on. And as Olivia said at the beginning, as you're working on all this area, then the Good Business Charter can be a really effective way to say, right, we've got to the end of this work, we're going to hold ourselves to account by these 10 components, make sure that each year we are still working and going deep in each one, and that we're able to communicate that in a really clear way to our customers, our suppliers, our employees, our investors, and any other stakeholders besides. So looking forward to taking your questions. I will also in a minute pop in the chat an example of one of our accredited organisations that has used this, our framework, just to help them explain what it means to be a responsible business.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jenny, for your time and for going into so much detail about the Good Business Charter accreditation. We are open up for questions now. Whilst they just come through, just going to pop on the slide. Just if you wanted to get in touch with Heart of the City, these are all the ways you can do it. And I will stop sharing now because I prefer to see our faces. We did have a question about if there's a difference between the living wage and the real living wage. I did answer it for the chat, but for those who haven't seen, yes, there is a difference between the two. So the national living wage is for only over 20 threes. I don't quite know why it is for over 23s, but it is for only over 23s. Whereas the real living wage is for everyone over 18, as Jenny said. And I recommend looking at the Living Wage Foundation resource website, which is fantastic. And they're also very happy to answer any questions you may have specific to your business. They're really helpful. They came in to speak to our members in February, and they're always really open to speak to businesses who want to look into accreditation. Whilst we wait for some questions, and please do pop them in, one question from me. If I'm a small business, do I have to do all 10 components?
So you do, we've been very clear that so that it is totally clear to the public, you have to be committed to all 10. Now that can be at the very start of the journey. When you're answering the questions, they are, do you commit to reducing your environmental impact? So you don't have to have done a load of things before, but you do have to say, right now, from this point, we will start working on this, looking at it, thinking about it. So you do have to do all 10, but we totally understand that businesses are on different parts of the journey, and different sectors have different challenges around some of those, and different parts. EDI can be very difficult for certain sectors in certain parts of the country, but you do have to make that commitment to say all these 10 matter and we are going to commit to being responsible in all 10.
Thank you. And Chantal, I can see you have your hand up, so I'm just going to let you allow to talk. I hope this works if you want to come off mute and ask your question.
It does. So
Great.
I've been the other side of the table when I was in big companies before doing, RFPs, and then now I'm a startup, navigating the world from a small business. I wanted to understand, so for me, coming now as a small business, how much of it is performative, in terms of what we're doing? Because when I come to answer things like carbon footprint, I look at my carbon footprint. I'm remote first, working from home. Like, how it's very difficult for me to then navigate that compared to companies that are then pulling everyone back to the office and then increasing their carbon footprint. Or from a DE&I perspective, when you actually look at, for example, the company that you've talked about, most of them are of the profile which is not DE&I. So they're saying it, but they're not doing it. And by then having to creating this uneven level playing, it's not a level playing field, it's very uneven, because even when you mention salaries, a lot of the companies are doing 0-hour contracts. So that means that they're not paying a fair living wage, but they kind of circumnavigate that. So there's a lot there that makes actually a more barrier to businesses entering that space. Does that make sense?
Well, I was hoping that for the smaller businesses, it should be more straightforward. Obviously, if you've got no staff, then you don't actually answer. Well, you answer the questions if you were to take on employees. And as I've said, if you are like working from home, the environmental is easy. Of course, you're committed to it. You've got a very small carbon footprint as it is. So when we work with the FSB, it was very much a case of a lot of these small businesses, it is easier actually, because they, except for certain sectors like hospitality, where the real living wage is a challenge, we would say that organisations are doing what they can. If they've only got 5 staff and they live in a particularly, very white area of Britain, it can be very difficult for them to kind of make that look more diverse if it's 95% white anyway in that area. So there's a lot of appreciation that for smaller businesses, this should be pretty straightforward to be able to commit to that. And therefore, for the large businesses, this is the big challenge. And we've been doing a lot of work recently over 0 hours. And the fact that organisations try and find loopholes, and we're like, no, actually, we just got to come down really hard on this. Whatever your start, whether they're casual, 0 hours, minimum hours, whatever you call them, they need to be encompassed by R5. They need to be paid the real living wage. They need to have the security within what's reasonable for the role. They need to be cared for. They need to have a voice, and they need to feel included. So it's we're kind of strengthening that and making sure that it's very clear, because some small businesses will say we've only got 20 core staff, so we're small. But then you find out they've got 60 or 70 casual staff doing events, and it's like, yeah. No, that they need to be included too.
Okay. And then for a small business, so you mentioned good business charter, you mentioned B Corp. What would be the things that would be the must-dos or the must, because you said you've got an audit background, right? What is it that we really have to nail that gives us the best chance in terms of going forward and winning business from an ethical point of view?
That's a very good question. I think that there's a consistency of reporting that is really key. I know that it's hard. It's what we're finding when we talk to some of our larger accredited organisations is that everyone's using different systems, and therefore they're expecting their supply chain to use these different systems, which is then a nightmare for small businesses because they've got to now join 3 different systems to win work. And that's why we're also trying to work kind of further up the scale to say, well, look, can't you use a GBC as part of, if you're smaller and you're GBC accredited, then can that be enough, or can that at least show something? And there's a lot of work to be done there, but I think what we would say is that obviously there's a carbon footprint and there's a lot of focus on that, but there is a focus on workers and making sure that they're treated well as well. So, and I think, there's obviously a lot of focus in last year or two on greenwashing, purpose washing, all that kind of stuff, which I think we're sort of trying to say, well, this is it. You can talk a good talk and get things, but are you lay yourself open to risk if you haven't thought of one area, which is why we've tried to kind of get this framework, but then within each framework you may go deep in one which is relevant to you.
So it would be well-rounded for me. For the good business charter gives you the well-rounded aspects that they're thinking through.
That's what we say. Like the report that I've just mentioned, they work in wealth management, so they did the good business charter and then they went deeper on tax because that was relevant for them. For small businesses, tax is rarely going to be relevant because we just all pay it and on we go. But I think that's it. It gives you that sort of holistic framework, and then you might go deep in one or two that are more relevant for your business or what you're doing.
And Chantal, sorry, I'm going to have to go to other questions, but just to say, I don't think you are a member of Heart of the City, but this is exactly the kind of thing that we talk about on the Foundation's Responsible Business Programme. We look at your business, we think about which directions you can go in. You can't do everything, especially if you're starting out, but it's making sense of quite a lot of jargon and a lot of requirements, and making sure that as you build your business, you're growing it in a responsible business way. So do have a look at our website. I'll pop it in the chat. Right, we do have 2 other questions. So one person said, can we get a list of the questions that a business is expected to commit to? So I'm guessing before you apply, can you look at the questions, Jenny?
Just popped it. I don't think I can send it to everyone, but if you are able to then send it to everyone, I've put it in our chat, the website link. So it's on our website because that's why we want to be really clear and transparent, so everyone can go and see the questions there. Those are for the 0 to 50, but if you also go to the apply page, we've got PDFs of the questions. So yes, you can do them first.
Perfect. So you can find it on the website, and we'll include it in the follow-up email as well. Thank you. Another question is, when you're asking about different sectors, Jenny, I guess this is why it's come through. How could a property investment and development company key into this initiative?
By accrediting. I think it's interesting in York. There's a big project going on here called York Central, where they're taking a huge brownfield site and they've got some partners in, and there's loads of property investment, real estate investment, and I'm there saying, and the council are doing a lot of talk of when it comes to filling those places and bringing businesses in, let's use a good business charter as something that would favour businesses, or in fact say you can only come and take up tenancy here if you're GBC accredited. I'm taking a step back and saying, what about the real estate? What about all the organisations that are involved in this development? We want them to lead the way. If they're saying that this matters about people and planet and place, then let's start here. So I'm trying to get contacts in there. But I think there's a lot of, the reality is that every business connects with other businesses, supply chain, clients, all the rest of it. And actually, I think property investment companies will have less, they're not a sector that has as much trouble with hours. And so I think it would be great to, credit is the quick answer to how to key in.
Thank you. We've got a question from Nick from Baldwin Boxall, who's a member of the Heart of the City of the programme. Hi, Nick. So they say that they are proud to be a real living wage employer and are looking at real living pensions. So the question to you, Jenny, is this important to becoming part of the business charter? I'm guessing, are you looking at real living pensions in the future?
So at the moment, it's not part of our 10. I am very well aware of the work that they're doing. And I think it's a little bit like sick pay. I've talked to the Centre for Progressive Policy on what they're doing around sick pay. Each component has different things that we could go on talking about ethical pensions as well, not just real living pensions, but what about a company having to commit to their pension for their staff being ethical and all that kind of stuff. What I would say is that yes, we're always looking at the different things that are around, and we want to be a listening charter and over time strengthening. Another thing that could happen is a government could come in that says, right, we're actually going to set the level at the real living wage, in which case we don't need to have it there because legal minimums should be being done anyway. So it enables us to always look at, well, what needs raising. So we haven't got pensions in at the moment. I'm well aware of the work, and it is quite a high bar to give that level of pension. So we are keeping close to it, and we work very closely with the Living Wage Foundation.
Great, thank you. I think that's it for questions. I'm going to wrap up there so we do finish on time. Thank you very much, Jenny. Thank you for all the engagement from our audience.